Good morning to those of you who are learning from home this week. I wanted to give you a bit of help with your investigation because I know some of you are having a hard time with it. So this is it here. The first thing, part A, we went out and had a look through the bins and we collected some data. So we weighed the different types of rubbish. We came up with a mass of plastic and a mass of paper when we weighed the rubbish in the science bins. And then we went out to the oval and we looked in the bins and we estimated the volume of the different types of rubbish. So that's two different sets of data. The next thing you did in part B was just give me a little bit of a plan for better data collection. Now we're up to part C, which is where we're processing and analysing the data. That means you're putting the data in tables, you're making graphs, and you're talking about what we found. So to give you some help with that, let me get the data out for you. Now, I hope that worked because I don't want to have to record this again. All right, here we go. So a little bit of information here. Get a pen. It's a little bit of information here about what we did, right? And that's so that you can do some calculations. And then down here we've got our actual data. So 665 grams of paper, 830 grams of plastic. We've got an amount of pieces, a number of pieces, but we didn't stick with that theme. So we're going to forget the number of pieces and just look at the mass. There were 7 drink containers, the 10-cent containers, the ones that the government will pay 10 cents for. More just bits of information that we wrote down. And then down here is the second data collection. I think the hard part about putting this in a table is that the second set of data only has paper and plastic, where the first set has paper, plastic, food, and miscellaneous stuff. So in that case, there's no miscellaneous stuff. Everything was either paper or plastic, and there's no food. So you just put 0 for those things. And we've got the mass of stuff. So you can take an average, and then you know roughly the mass of rubbish in 4 bin bags. Now, there were 20 bags in the bin. So if you multiply our mass by 5, you'll know how much was in the whole bin. And then if you multiply that by 5, you will know the amount of rubbish in all the bins around the school in total for 1 week. Now, there's 40 weeks in a school year. So if you multiply that number by 40, you have an idea of the amount, the mass of rubbish that we are sending to the tip every year. With that, you also know the cost of the rubbish that we're sending to the tip every year. It's about $20,000. So then we went out and looked at the volume. All right, so hang on, let's go back to this. So you put this stuff into a table and you graph it, which I'll show you in a minute. Then we went out to the oval and we estimated the percentage by volume of the different types of waste in the 5 different bins. Bin 1 and bin 2 were on the oval, bin 3 at the canteen, and this is almost in a table for you. But let me get the table that I drew for you. Just hold on. I don't think I paused it. I think we're still recording. Okay, let's have a look. This is a table that I made up with the percentages of all the different types of waste. It doesn't have a title. You need to give it a good title. And I would call it something like volume of waste by percentage of rubbish bins at Kent Street, something like that. And then I graphed it. And hopefully I've shown you how to graph it. This is not the title of the graph. I want you to write your own title, which is similar to the title of the table. all the stuff is broken up into percentages. Just a sec, just a sec. I can't remember where I was up to. I got interrupted, but let's have a look here. Okay, so you're going to make graphs. So you're going to have graphs that have got that show the waste by volume, and you've got graphs that show the waste by mass. And you've calculated how much rubbish we've got in a year. That's one of the calculations you need to do. Now I'm going to find the marking key. There it is. So at the back of your investigation, now this is all on today's lesson. All the documents are on today's lesson, so you can look at that. There's part A, this is part B, this is part C. So I want you to have a look at the marking key. It says that you've provided sample data processing calculations. That means if you've taken an average, you write down in an appendix at the back, you write down average calculation and show me that you added the three numbers up and divided by 3 or whatever it was to take an average. So you would say average percentage by mass of plastic, and you would write down the numbers, add them up and divide by how many there are. So I can see that you know how to take an average. Now you're supposed to put in 3 types of data calculations. Adding up the totals is a calculation. Finding the percentage, no, finding the average is a calculation, and you could also like work out how much rubbish we have in a year. That's also one of the calculations you could do. Graphing here. So you're supposed to have 3 different graphs, and you can graph the different bins. Some people have sent me 10 graphs. You can graph the mass. You should be graphing the mass, you should be graphing the volume, and you can graph all the different bins. So you've got graphs, and all of the graphs have to have all the things that are written on here, a title, a title that tells you the 2 variables, the type of waste and how and what it is, whether it's mass or volume, percentage or whatever, or actual mass. So a title, it's got an accurate graph, it looks tidy, it's got labelled axes, and it's got proper units. Now your pie charts, the round ones, they won't have axes, but you have to have the little key at the bottom. And if you're putting in 4 graphs that show me percentage by volume, I want all of those to have the same colour for plastic, the same colour for paper, so that they can be compared. Now, summarising the data, you need to say things like, let me see, I've got an example here somewhere. Help in the help document. Here it is. Here's an example. I wrote, on average, 40% of the waste by volume was plastic wrappers. So, well, there was an average of 21% containers and 50%. Well, there was an average of 21% plastic containers. In the canteen, there were 50% plastic containers. That tells me there's more plastic containers being thrown in the canteen bin. It also suggests that maybe a lot of the rubbish is coming from the canteen, and maybe the canteen is what we need to look at to reduce our rubbish. I also wrote down here that there were none of the 10-cent drink containers in the canteen. There was a 10-cent bin right next to that. There were plenty of them in the Oval where there's no 10-cent bin. So that tells me that if we put a 10-cent bin on the Oval, we might collect some of those containers and keep them out of the rubbish. So the sort of things that you can figure out by looking at your data, you're going to say a few of those things. Now let's go back to your marking key. Here it is. So summarizing data is telling me what you found. Okay. And then you've got to write some solutions and some suggested solutions. Let me find those in the help document. Solutions. You need 2 of them. So you need to say how it's going to help cut down on waste. So you might say that that we put 10-cent bins. So for the containers that the government will pay us for, the 10-cent bins, so that we can put all those bottles there, that we have those next to all the rubbish bins. that we have them in a certain colour and it's a different colour to the rubbish bin so everyone can identify them easily so that people won't put their hamburgers in the drink container bin. You might say that we should compost the paper and the food scraps. And then you've got to show me some research that tells me how composting or why composting is a good idea, how much waste you think it can save from the bins, and there's some more calculations for you. I've got some other suggestions down here. I've got using recycled materials in projects like the fashion program could be using making things out of recycled fabrics. We could do some education in the school to encourage people to bring containers from home instead of buying food that's in plastic packaging. We could take a closer look at what's going on in the school and find out more about what's going in the bins, do some more studies. That would also help us to cut down. But whatever suggestions you make, let me see if I've got any more down here. Whatever suggestions you make, let's have a look at the marking key again, because you should always be looking at your marking key when you're doing this kind of thing. So the solutions have to be based on research, which means you have to look for somewhere where it's been done in the past. And then see down here, you've got provide sample calculations for financial savings. If paper and food rubbish is 40% of our bins, then you show me how that can save 40% of the money for the school. You could also talk about how it can save us from buying fertilizers and mulch for the garden because we can make our own with compost. So that's what I want you to do. Now, the next section, Part D, the poster, all I want you to do is pick a couple of the main bits from your investigation, one of your graphs, and a couple of little bits of headline that says, we make this much rubbish, we can save this much money by composting or whatever. It's just really, really little dot points on a poster. That should be fairly straightforward. And then the last part, which we haven't started yet, is where you're just going to gather up all of your stuff, all of your part A, your introduction, your part B, your little plan bit, your part C with your graphs, and you're going to put it all together as one document. That's the last part of it. Now, after that, what I really wanted to start this week, so I'm disappointed you're not here to do it, is the project where you're building something that's going to save waste and then doing some research into that. Now, the project is also on the resources tab of your Compass page. So all of the documents I've just shown you are on today's lesson. Any questions, send me a message. Good luck, and I hope to see you all in a few days.